Hello, welcome back to Strangers in a Strange Land. Today we are sitting here with Bernarda, who is originally Brazilian. And I'm not going to tell you the rest of her story because there's a lot of it. So I'll hand over to her. Hi, Bernie. Welcome to our podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here with you all.
Hello.
Thank you. Hey, Jim. So I'm from Brazil, as you said. You can call me Bernie. Everybody calls me Bernie. It's my Australian nickname. I left Brazil. Yeah, I can tell you the story about that. I left Brazil in 2007.
Where in Brazil?
I'm from Rio.
Rio,
from
okay.
Rio de Janeiro. Yeah, big city. I'm going back there for holidays after 6 years. Family was killing me. It's like, I need to come back. And so I moved to Australia in 2007. I lived there. First, I moved to Melbourne. So I lived in Melbourne for a year. Then I moved to Sydney for over 9 years. So I lived there for over 9 years. And then it's all about jobs, all about work. I've been working, I moved to IT industry. I wasn't in the IT industry. It's actually thanks to Damana, but that's another story that one day we can tell.
You're welcome. I'm sorry.
It's all your fault. Because I had a big career change. I had several career change, but that was one of them. And I ended up in IT, and that's how I've been moving a lot abroad. So I lived there for 9 years in Sydney. Love Sydney. Hope to come back one day. And then I got a job in the Netherlands. So I was living in Amsterdam for about almost 4 years. It was 3 and a bit, 3 years, 8 months. So I lived there, worked for a big bank. Met lots of great people. The Netherlands doesn't have great food, I have to say. It's right. I come back from Australia with all this beautiful, different, food and culture, and then the Netherlands, the food is quite really bland. And then 3 months ago, it's been 3 months now. It's actually been 2 days. I moved to Germany. I'm living now in Dusseldorf, which is on the west side of Germany. For the ones that don't know what it is, it's a great city. It's definitely the second smallest city that I lived, because it's like a little bit 600,000 people. Because during my time in the Netherlands, that's an important story to tell. During the time of the Netherlands, I actually lived in Italy for 3-4 months while working in the Netherlands. It was a great experience. So I have to say that I also live in Italy. I live in a city called Asti, which is not even 8,000 people. It was really tiny. But it was beautiful. It's a beautiful wine, a beautiful food. It's like a center. It's in the north of Italy, close to Milan and Turin. And it's got movie festivals and beautiful food and wine if you like it. So that's my travel journey. And it's
so you didn't just flee across the border from the Netherlands to go get good food in Italy. Like what was the reason behind that 3 months?
Well, it was because of my father is Italian, and as part of the process of the Italian citizenship, you need to live in Italy for a while. Right. So I was waiting for the whole process to finish. So this was the reason why I went to Italy. So I lived there. It was a bit 3 or 4 months, but look, it's my plan to go back. I really wish, that's my dream. If I may say my dream is to have 6 months in Australia, living, summer and spring in Australia, and same thing here, spring and summer in Italy, and never have winter in my life.
You need to have the money for that.
Well, true, but Italy houses, depending on where you have, it's not that expensive.
Right.
Same as south of Spain, and not south of Italy, because south of Italy is kind of expensive these days, but depending on where you are, if it's a small town, you actually can get quite cheap stuff. I was really surprised with the prices over there.
What inspired you to leave Rio and move to Australia? What's the story behind that? decision?
Yeah, that's a good story. So I always dreamed since I'm very young. I used to journal. I still journal a lot, but since very young, I was always journaling about getting to know the world, right? And I come from a poor family. My family is not rich, was never rich, right? So I couldn't travel. Like I spent until I was 17 years old, I had never left Rio, or like I was always like within Rio, right? Not even the next state, right? So when I was 17, did my first trip when I went to New York for a month, right? And that was the spark. I was like, that is it. I really want to travel. I really want to get to know the world. And I also hold a degree in history. So I studied history. So, when you're reading all these books about everywhere in the world and you can only count on your imagination,
Yeah.
Obviously internet was blooming at that time. So you could a little bit get, some understanding of what's going on in the world, but definitely nowadays is easier. Right. And I spent a month there on holidays because I had a boyfriend whose family was North American. So it was cheap because I had a place to stay. I didn't have to pay for hotels or any of that. It was really much just a trip.
Yep.
And I saved up for that trip. I was like, I want to go one day. And at that stage, it became my thing. Like, I need to live abroad. I wanted to do my master's degree outside Brazil. That never actually happened. But then the first reason why I moved to Australia is because my ex-husband, who is actually the best thing that came out of my divorce, was my friendship with Damana.
We say that about each other's marriages. This is true.
Yeah.
I used to work with him. That's how I met Bernarda.
Right.
Yeah. So he got a job in the same company as Damana was working at the time, and we moved. And I remember today, he's like, oh, do you want to move abroad? I was like, I do. Let's just move. Right. So that's why I had to change my career, because I was actually in Brazil. I was teaching history. That was my first career, but I was also working for a website. And that's how I already started transitioning to IT. Right.
It's great because, it's great, but it's also not like it's a brave thing, because you gave up the stability of what you're currently, and a lot of people struggle with that, to do something that you wanted to do, but also, but you're also at the mercy of somebody else because you're dependent on that person. Yeah. That to me seems, I don't know, like I would feel very, very in a vulnerable position to do that.
It was, and it was for a long time because I couldn't find a job fast. Yeah. Even though I was English, I used to speak English. That wasn't a problem. Although Australian is a harder one to understand. I remember it took me like about 3 months to be able to start understanding well Australians, right? And then I really got dependent. I stayed there, and it wasn't a great place to be. No wonder. My current partner is German, right? That's one of the reasons why I'm here. I moved to Germany, but I told him, I was like, I will never move anywhere in the world now without a job, because I never felt comfortable being dependent on someone. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So it was really, really a struggle for a few years there until I actually got back into the job market, But I did I did this smarter route, which in Melbourne, I used to live very close to the Melbourne library, like literally in front of it. So I could just go to the library and study. And that's what I did, because I didn't have the money to go to any course because it was super expensive for expats. Yeah. Right. So if you don't have residency, you pay thousands of dollars.
Most countries are like that.
Yeah.
It is a lot of cash. So I didn't have that money. So I just went to the library and study. And then when I discovered the world of Agile, which is what I work today, which I got introduced by Tamana as well, right? I just started reading all the books. So I used to go to the library and study and read and read and read. And that's how I ended up landing a job years later. I started as a business analyst, but I had done, at that time, actually, I was about to get the Australian residency. That's another thing as well. So as soon as I got it, I studied web technology. I went to TAFE, and I studied web technologies at TAFE.
So for those that don't know, in Australia, TAFE is a school run by the government. I mean, in each state, but there's a TAFE, and you can learn a trade.
Yeah, it's vocational education.
Vocational education in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Here in Germany, they call the technical school. It's like, it's not a, so you have the similar concept here as well. We don't need to go to university. You can do what they call technical school. And I think in Brazil as well, actually.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah.
So then you went Melbourne and you moved to Sydney, which is where I met you.
Yes.
And then you stayed in Sydney for 9 years. Why?
Yes. Well, I think because, well, the weather is great. I love the weather.
Why not? Right? That's
why
really
not?
that's the discussion we should be having. Why not?
Hey, I'm in Brisbane. I'm like, prove it to me. No, seriously, I'm kidding. I love Sydney.
Yeah, but also it took me time. Look, I always wanted to go somewhere else, right? But it took me time to build my career, you know, and be able to afford, you know, doing what I'm doing now.
Yep.
You know, it took time, you know, so that you can have a safe net and a safe landing as well. If something goes wrong, you know, you need to have some money there, you know, to be able to afford, you know. So here in the Netherlands, when I came here, I came with a visa, working visa, right? I didn't have citizenship yet. That's why I ended up going and get my citizenship, because then I could move across Europe, wherever I want to go in the Eurozone, I can work or live, right?
Yep.
Because I wasn't thinking about that. So I came with a working visa. And if I would lose my job, I think it's similar to Australia. I don't know how it is these days, but you have 90 days to find another job that is going to sponsor you to stay.
Yeah, which is hard.
Right?
It's a very difficult thing to do.
It is. And as a foreigner, especially in a country that English is not the first language, that's even harder.
Yeah.
Right. So I would have to find a Dutch place, right, that would speak English. There are several, but it's not as easy, right? And then you have a pandemic and things get even harder, for example. I had a situation, for example, with a colleague at work. He wasn't from there either. And he was a direct report to me. And it was the hardest thing that I had to do for someone, because he is from Belarus. So he's not from Europe, right? But he's got his family here, wife, kids, you know, and the pandemic hit and all the temporary contracts got cut. And he was still on his it's temporary contract. It's a year contract that we had. And it was the hardest thing that I had to do for someone. But I knew, as an expat, I knew how hard and insecure that is. So I fought for him. You know, I went to leadership and I'm like, you know what, that's not fair. I brought him over. You know, we need to keep him. Yeah. Right. And that is really hard.
I'm glad to hear you say that. Not a lot of people would do that. I don't, in my experience, and it's a brave thing to do. So I really, really commend you. And you're now one of my favorite people for doing that.
Look, it was the first person. Everybody else was Dutch or had a right to stay here. Yep. So I wasn't too worried about them, because then you fall into the European social system, which is great, you know, and you're going to receive your salary or good part of your salary. But he would have to fly back to Belarus, which politically is also not
a good thing right now. Yeah. Yes.
Right,
especially if you're a journalist.
Yes,
I do have to say, when I was working in the US, there were two things I did. I became tolerant of bad situations. I could get through them, because the alternative was to quit and go home within 3 months. And the other thing was that I was very careful about what I said about the US government, because I was worried I could get deported for a tweet. And so those two things, like you guys know me, it's hard for me to shut up. And no, it was something I had to learn over there.
Well, so, the free speech people are not so free speech in America as much as they like to think they are.
Yeah. I think that works.
So look, but this is the same here. I'm also very scared of saying anything against, you know, sometimes I joke about German culture because it's so strict in some ways and some free in others. It's for me, it's a very confusing culture sometimes.
Tell us about that, because like that's one of the things about it we want to know about is what are those culture things, like going to German culture, because there's so many stereotypes about it. I would love to hear your version of things.
What's true and what's not true.
Yeah, what's true and what's not.
Well, it's hard to be generalist, right? We can't generalize every culture because it's not true. But so one of the things that I've noticed a lot, right? So Germans have this very organized way of working. You know, it's super structured. You know, they like to know what's going to happen, you know, which is a pitfall, especially if you're working in innovation, right? Because they're like, look, dude, you have to experiment and try out.
It's agile, yeah.
No wonder most innovation hubs are in Berlin, which is the most diverse place to be in Germany, right? So what is it called? The startups that are coming from this side where I am, right? They struggle. No wonder they are hiring me. You know, because like,
Yep.
what do we need to do here to do differently? You know, and it's very hierarchical. So the hierarchy is, and they say like, it's really, they say, oh, we are not very, I was like, yes, you are. You are, because it's ingrained in your culture.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, it doesn't matter if there is nothing in the piece of paper. Like you look at the org charts, they want to be very like free and but you see that is everybody knows who to report to and to talk to. And one day I said to in my company, I said, look, it's not because it's not on paper that it isn't, right? Because people know how to behave. The hierarchy is there, right? The same thing happened when I was in the Netherlands. The Netherlands is the opposite. It's way flatter, like in terms of hierarchy. However, they work with partners or even companies that are part of their home hub here in Germany and in Poland, right? And Poland get to the extreme that they wouldn't refer to their bosses by name, his last name, and super like, so the hierarchy is clear.
Yep.
Right.
Most
So this is one of the
companies
things.
are like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that feel as a Brazilian? Because the Brazilians I know are passionate and hot-headed, and you try to put them in a corner, and no, that's not going to happen. So how
let's
do you
not
break that
generalize,
trap?
Devana. Let's not generalize at all.
I know a lot of Brazilians, and I couldn't say that a lot of them are very like what she just described. So like, how do you well, even if it's just you, and I'm stereotyping you, how do you deal with that tension?
Look, I think nowadays I'm much more empathic and conscious. Age helps us with that. But also my career, right? Like what I do for a living. I'm an agile coach. I've led teams, and in leading teams in a pandemic is really a different. You went through that as well, Daman, I think, and it's a different beast, right? Because it's the uncertainty is so high. So for me, it's really about also looking inside myself, right? Like really understanding what is this emotion coming from? Why am I feeling this way? What is triggering it? Like the other day, someone told me something at work that it sparked a really bad trigger. Instead of like saying anything, I didn't say anything, right? I went on, I sat down, and I started thinking at work, it's like, why this is triggering me? Right. And I can tell you what the story was. I went to the kitchen in the office, and I got a pack of nuts, right? Because they have like free stuff. And a guy said, it's like, oh, why don't you eat an apple? And I'm like, it triggered me. It triggered me really badly. Right. I was like, oh, in my brain straight away, what I thought is like, why is this guy telling me what to eat? Yeah. Right. But he was making like it's probably because the fruit was actually Wednesday or Thursday, and then the weekend would come and the fruit would be rotten because obviously no one would have eaten it. Right. So that would probably be his version of the story. All right. But in me, I was like, this guy's telling me what to eat. Why? Trying to control me somehow. Yeah. So what I did was I didn't answer. I was like, oh, I just want nuts. And then I went to my desk and I started thinking, I was like, why is this triggering me? And then trying to understand and not to react, because we never know what is in the other side. Like maybe he had no intention whatsoever about anything, but I have my own problems or traumas or whatever. And then I have to look, and everybody has that. Yeah. Right. In different ways, different triggers. Right.
And I like that line that says, don't worry too much what people think of you. They really do.
Yeah,
that's true. And another bit of around that, some of the best advice I got from a peer of mine a while back was always assume good intent, because sometimes people don't communicate well. I mean, I've got my own problems. Like I can react emotionally, but and I still like, oh, why do they do that? And it's very hard to be objective and step outside yourself and look at it. But it's good that you did that.
Is that something you would have learned if you'd stayed in Rio? Is this something from traveling, or is this just something from managing people? So. Like, I just wonder, because like traveling makes you look at yourself, right?
It does. And also to be respectful of our culture, right? So you can't expect to be in someone else's culture. And I mean, some people try to push their way through, and you ended up being disrespectful to whatever, they are. For example, I find it really interesting to see, for example, Germans, they do hug each other. People think that they don't. They do, right? As long as it's within their family nucleus,
Yep.
right? Obviously, they're not going to hug you if they don't know you. It's not something they would do. But if you look at Asian cultures, for example, like you all work with Asians don't touch. You know, it's a very different aspect of it. Like Vietnamese, for example, I have a friend who's from Vietnam. It's a completely separate thing, right? So, but for me, being Brazilian, hugs is like for everyone. I had to control that. Yeah. Because many people would confuse. I had a case in Australia that happened. People would confuse, think like I'm like hitting on them. I'm like, no, I'm not. Yeah. And then I stopped doing it. Yeah. So I started changing my behavior to make sure that people wouldn't think anything otherwise. Because obviously they don't understand my culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Brazil, we would hug each other and kiss each other, like in the face, obviously, in the office.
Yeah.
Right.
Americans are like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you don't do it, then there's something wrong with you. So if you go back to Brazil, you've got to start doing it again. But once you leave, you stop. And you learn to switch context in your brain to be able to do that the more you travel. Yeah,
exactly. You have to navigate the culture, right? So I did that and to stop doing it, you know. But I know in Brazil it's completely different. And also the type of jokes, like Germans are very funny. You wouldn't expect that. They are super funny. And they have a sense of humor.
I agree with you.
So we think that Germans like, you know, that strict, you know, it's not. You know, they are super funny. They make jokes and they take the, like, I made a joke the other day with my boss and he was like laughing, you know, he wasn't like super serious or any of that. And I even asked, I was like, I hope you don't mind. He's like, no, not at all. He was super fine with that.
That's interesting. So, smashing stereotypes. That's really cool.
Yeah.
What about when the other way around? Are there Brazilian stereotypes that you've had to smash with other people?
I think a very famous case of that was in Australia, actually. It was my first day at work. I was working for a bank, actually the same bank that I worked in the Netherlands. And this guy comes to me, he's like, oh, you're Brazilian, so you love samba.
Really?
And I look at him, I was like, I have no idea how to dance samba. I'm sorry.
And you're like, and you're from Rio. Why don't you know samba?
I don't know how to dance samba. I'm really sorry. So that's the biggest stereotype, that everybody knows how to samba or like samba. And I think, there was another one as well. There was also in Australia, actually. I was walking on the street with a colleague who is Aussie. And we were at, what's the name of the street? We were in one of the busiest street, Pitt Street. And this girl was walking in front of us and she had a very short skirt, like super short, right? And nothing wrong with that, whatever she wants to wear it, right? But you could actually see her butt. It was that point, right? Then my colleague said, wow, that's really short. And then I was like, yeah, that's a, you know, good, whatever she wants, but that's a little bit too short for me. And she was like, isn't it like that the Brazilians walk in Brazil? Why aren't you used to that? And I'm like, no.
Don't you only just wear bikinis everywhere? I'm pretty sure I've seen that on television.
Like, that is not like that. Yeah, on the beach, sure.
Yeah, of course.
Not on the streets. Not at 9:00 p.m., you know, on Pitt Street.
That's funny. That's so cool.
Yeah, that is one of the common ones as well that I hear a lot. People wearing, you know. So that's
especially from Rio. Yeah. Jim, you're looking.
There was one in the Netherlands. That's an interesting. That was an
Aussie one. Oh, Brazilian one. Sorry.
No, it was a Dutch guy, and we were talking. Let me remember the full story now, because that one was a bad one actually. Oh yeah. So he implied I was in the Netherlands because I wanted to become European. So I want to get a passport.
Oh, that sounds so American. That's what Americans say to immigrants. They're like,
do it as well.
You're doing this so that you can, and it's like.
And I was like, and then I stopped, but my sense of humor was really nice. Like something hit on me. That was like, oh, that is funny you say that, because I don't think that that's going to be a problem for me. Actually, it's going to be a problem for you, because I can actually live in Europe because I've got an Italian passport. And it was just about Brexit, when Brexit hit. Right? I also have Australian passport, so I can go to the UK anytime soon, but you can't.
Yeah.
You're gonna need a visa. So he was like, oh, you have an European passport? I was like, yeah, I do. So you made it the wrong assumption. And then and then the other guy that was close to me who knew me said, like, oh, she also has an Australian passport. She's also Australian.
I collect them. I remember when I was in America, everyone kept asking when I was going to get a green card. And I said, oh, I'm not going to. The working visa conditions for Australians in the US are very, very good and very easy to get.
Yeah.
And there's no limit like the H1 visas in the US. You can have it for as long as you can renew. And people couldn't understand why I didn't want a green card. And I said, well, I'll just leave it for someone who actually needs it. And they're like, don't you want to live here forever? And I'm like, no, I'm going to go home to Australia. And it was like unfathomable. Why didn't I want a green card to the most amazing country on earth? And I'm like,
that's so American. It's so, like, people cannot understand.
Yeah.
Most countries are like that. Like, why would we understand why you want to be here. It's an amazing place. But they can't understand why anybody else would want to go see the rest of the world either. I was so ingrained in that when I moved to Sydney, one of the first Australians I met, this woman named Katie, who I worked with, I said, have you ever been to America? She's like, no, why do I want to go? And I'd never heard anybody say they didn't want to visit America. That was the first time anybody had ever said that to me. And I was like, what? And then the world's a big place. It's okay. It's not a problem.
But that's very true, Damana. Very true. I had similar thing here as well. When I said, because in the beginning when I moved here, I didn't say to anyone that I didn't want to stay, right? Because I thought that they would feel offended. And they did when I did say, because the only reason why I did say was because they were like, you were here for 2 years and don't speak Dutch. And then I took to the point that I was like, and I won't, because I'm not staying. So why would I spend my time learning a language that I'm not going to use?
Yeah.
Right. And it got to the point that it was so annoying that people kept saying, like, oh, when you're going to learn that? Because then I became a manager, right? And then it was even worse because then it's really expected that you speak the language, and I'm like, I'm not staying here. And then I said, there was one guy that was really, really annoying. And then I said to him, I was like, look, if any language I'm going to learn, apart from the ones I already speak, it's going to be German because my partner is German.
How many languages do you speak?
I speak Portuguese, Italian. Well, I'm learning German now and English, obviously.
And she got us through Paris because she was able to understand French. I'd keep turning to her and going, what are they saying? And she could break down most of the sentence.
Is that because you can speak Italian, or is it because you can speak, because Portuguese is different enough?
Yes, so I can read French, but I could never manage to speak it, to be honest, because I learned French at university to read. We call technical French. It's just to read, to be able to read, because most of the texts were in French, right? And Spanish is similar to Spanish. I can actually understand Spanish a lot. But I don't speak fluently. So I don't say that I speak it because I don't really speak fluently. Same as French. French I can't speak, but I can understand most of it. Not everything, but most of it.
And you've got Google Translate. Google Translate will save you. Bernie and I were in Paris for her birthday a couple of years ago, and I had my phone out looking at the menu, translating it to English. And Bernie turned around to me quietly because there was a big group of people. And she said, Damana, that's already in English. I didn't even look to see who was in French, but she was very sweet. She just said it quietly, and I'm like,
great. That's so good. That's funny.
That's so bad. So speaking of food, because we ate a lot in Paris.
We did.
Of the countries you've lived in, so Brazil, Australia, the Netherlands. Now that you're in Germany, what do you miss? What food do you miss?
What food do I miss? Look, I do miss Malaysian, Thai. Yeah, I miss that a lot. I remember the papaya salad, Damana, that we had in the Mingo Market in Darwin.
Darwin, yeah.
I cannot find that anywhere, and even if I do, it's not the same.
Yeah, they made it for us just right next to the beach. They make it for you fresh and grate it, and then they season it, and then they just hand it over to you. It's like $10, and you go sit on the beach and eat.
So for the viewers that don't know, like, the quality of Asian food in Australia is way up here. And it's incredible. Like, you go to Asia, it's good, but obviously, but outside of Asia. And
this was North Australia as well, so it's full of Southeast Asians. So it has such good food. What else?
Actually, one point that I don't particularly like sushi or Japanese food in general. I do like ramen. The hot pot I do like, but I don't eat seafood. So for me, it's a harder one to say that sushi here is good. However, in Germany, there is a huge Japanese community. So there are lots of Japanese restaurants. So if you like ramen here in Dusseldorf, particularly in Dusseldorf, for some reason, but in Dusseldorf specifically.
Wow.
Yeah, and we had the same in Brazil, but also I don't eat sushi. So, but in Brazil, it's actually the second biggest colony outside Japan is in Brazil, and apparently he is one of the top 5 as well. There is a lot of Japanese people here. So this is something, yeah. So ramen here is amazing in Dusseldorf, or any of the hot Japanese like chicken teriyaki stuff like that. It's really good.
What about food from home, like Brazil?
Oh, from Brazil, it's interesting because I miss stuff that is very hard to find outside. So obviously, one of the most traditional foods in Brazil is called feijoada, which is black beans. It's a mix of black beans with lots of meat. All right, I think you had it, haven't you, Bruno? I think you did.
Yeah.
So that is very traditional, but I can make that here. I can get stuff, most of the stuff that in Europe, even easier than in Australia. Because here you can find some type of meat that you couldn't find in Australia.
Have you found a Brazilian butcher there, like you had in Sydney?
No. Here in the Netherlands, yes, not here yet.
Okay.
Not yet. I need to shop around the Brazilian communities and ask, but I haven't. But I managed to find some cuts, so that was okay. Or online, there are lots of Brazilian online shops that you can buy some stuff. So that is. But there are some, like there is palm heart salad.
Love palm hearts.
I know, but in Brazil it's different. I've got to tell you that one, it tastes different in Brazil than it is in here or in Australia.
Yeah,
and I know Indonesia has, so Indonesians have palm heart, and it's something that they eat as well. So you probably can find over there. Yeah.
But nothing tastes like it does at home, right? Jim, you must have foods like that where you go back and the water tastes different or something. So the food tastes.
And
different.
There is a mix. There is a food that I really love that my mom used to make, which is with beans as well, but it's brown beans. And it's mixed with lots of vegetables and farofa. Farofa is cassava flour. Cassava is like potato. And you mix that. It's like next day food, like leftover food that you just mix and then put eggs in it. I love that stuff. You can't find that.
I'm hungry again. But this always
I don't know how to make it very
show.
well. So.
Yeah, it's a food show.
So Jim, go. I've been asking all the questions.
No. I love the food question. I guess, how is it? I mean, obviously you've met Damana, but how is it making friends wherever you go? Like, what's the hard part? What's the easy things about that in Australia, in Netherlands, in Germany?
Look, well, obviously in Australia, I do have some Australian friends. I think not all of them, most of them are from not like they have what is it called, culturally different backgrounds. So they are not third, fourth generation Australians. I have one Australian, that's where my name Bernie came from. He's Aussie, born, being there for a long time. David, he's probably 60 years old now. I think he just turned 60 actually. And he was the one who gave me my nickname. Because when I arrived in Australia, and the only reason why I met him is because he was learning Portuguese, because it's very much connected to music. And he wanted to learn many of the Brazilian music. He loved bossa nova and Brazilian music. So I was helping him with Portuguese, and he was helping me perfect my English. And he became one of my greatest friends, Australian friends. And I have a few others, but obviously the Brazilian community is huge in Australia. So I have lots of Brazilian friends there. And expats friends, people that moved to Australia.
It's a common theme amongst people we talk to is expats gravitate towards expats.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what about the Netherlands and Germany?
Yeah, Netherlands was a bit different. The Netherlands, they are very much friends with Dutch. Like it's Dutch with Dutch because it's very either from school or family. So it's really hard to penetrate the culture without speaking the language. Really hard. It's almost impossible. I've made friends there with also Brazilians, but North American. I have a very good friend from there, and most of the Brazilian ones. Most of my friends are Brazilians. Here in Germany, I'm suffering a little bit more because obviously I'm lucky because I have my partner's family's from here. That's why I moved to Dusseldorf. I mean, he's from close to Dusseldorf. He's not from the city. So I'm more connected to them. Obviously, people from work, but I haven't managed to get a friendship with anyone. But I have very good relationship with many of them.
Yep.
You're only 3 months in, though. You're only 3 months in.
Yeah, it's only 3 months.
You can't judge by 3 months, though. I think you need 6 months to work it out.
I need to, but also I need to go out. With pandemic is a little bit hard, but I need to go out more.
Yeah.
You know, and see if I can meet some more people from other places.
How's your German?
And my company. How's my German? Is that what you asked? Sorry.
How's it coming along?
It's better. It's much better. I managed to nail the structure. So when people are speaking, I can understand much better now, because the structure of German is completely different, right? So they push the verbs to the end. It's kind of like a different way of thinking.
So you're waiting. You're like, what happened?
And combining words. They combine a lot of words.
Oh yeah, they're famous. They're famous for that. Yeah,
but it's great because like it makes your life much more like way easier. I'll give you an example. So if you want to go to the hospital in Germany, hospital is Krankenhaus. Kranken, sick, house is the same, right? So it's the house of the sick, right? Yep. And then if you want to go to if you need a ambulance, which is another word in English or in Portuguese as well, by the way, it's the same thing. You have a Krankenwagen. Kranken, again, sick.
House of the sick wagon.
The way they juxtapose words is so great. Like I could go to any of my German friends and say, is there a word for a situation where the color purple has inspired somebody to do something random that causes an accident? And they'll go, oh yes, there is. It's this, and it's about this long. And everyone knows it. It's so crazy, and it's great.
It's great. It makes it's a logical language. That's why it makes so people say that it's very hard. I do understand that it's hard. When you nail the structure, it becomes easier. So nowadays, for example, I can say like most time when people are having conversations, I can understand at least the essence of the conversation.
Yep.
Right. If it's something really off, like a subject that I have no idea, then it becomes harder. But day-to-day work, I can understand when people are talking. Right. Because I can pick up the words as well. So what I'm doing now is building my vocabulary, because that's the part of it that is, I think, is the next stage for you to become more fluent. So I can say like day-to-day stuff I can speak. Yep. I can understand most of whatever is written in the menu. It's not one of the, like, it's the first thing that I look like, oh, what is this? What is this? Right? Because I really dislike not knowing what I'm eating.
How long ago did you start to learn, like you really started to learn language? Like put an effort in?
Now I started German, like seriously. I started taking classes. I'm doing one-on-one classes, maybe once or twice a week now, for almost 2 years now. It's been almost 2 years, 1.5 years. 1.5. It hasn't got 2 years yet.
So you had a little prep going into, now you're immersed. How many people speak English? Like, do you have to speak German to get by, or?
In the shops, yes.
Yep.
Or doctors. That is the hardest one.
Yeah.
Because I went to the doctor and I got told that the doctor speaks English. And I was like, okay, great. Because like medicine, you can't, it's really hard. Right. Yeah. And I was lucky because I said, Sebastian comes with me just in case. And I needed him because the doctor started speaking English and she was struggling to express what.
And next thing you know, you're in a hospital, they're taking your arm off and you're like, what did I say?
Hold on, wait. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the terms, so I even said to her, I was like, just say the terms in German, I may understand, because most of it come from Latin. So it's kind of like going to be the same as in Portuguese, and they are, most of it they are.
Yep.
All right, so you can sort of understand, but yeah. So that was
specific. It's like specific language for that profession.
And if you want to live in Germany, you need to speak the language. You will have, if you want to stay here. Yeah, especially in this side of the world, you have to. I think I already said that, but sorry about that, but you have to. Different from the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, you can survive without. You know, you're going to end up having, you may have Dutch friends, maybe, no, but you most likely will find expat friends, and then you're going to be fine speaking just English. You know, I know people that live in the Netherlands for a long time and they haven't ever, needed to speak fluently Dutch. I had a boss, an Irish boss. He was in the Netherlands for 12 years, and his whole leadership team was most of it was Dutch, and he understood Dutch. He could understand the language, but he could never develop it to speak.
Yeah.
Right. So he had a lot of trouble speaking. Yeah.
Parts of Sweden seem similar. Like apparently in Stockholm, you can get by not speaking Swedish and do that. Back to the expat experience. How do people back in Brazil see you now as an expat? Like you've been gone since 2007, you said?
Yeah, it's been like 14 years, 13 years.
Mhm.
So when you go home, is it like, they're like, oh, we want to know everything? Or is there an element of like, when I go back home, it's like, why did you leave? You're a traitor. You don't love America, blah, blah, blah. Is it like that or a bit
there
of
are
both?
both.
Yeah.
There are a bit of both. Yeah. So I was in 2016 or 15. I went to a friend's wedding, and I decided to go like that, like was one day to another. And also I had to have lots of paperwork that I needed to do for my family. So I was like, I need to go to Brazil. Right. And I went to this wedding, and there was a little bit of both. Some people like slapping because Brazilians are very emotional, they're like slapping my arms, like, why did you leave? Oh, you're leaving us here. And I'm like, oh. And there were the people that I were like, oh, thank God you left. This place is horrible. So you can get a mix of both, right? Which is not horrible, by the way, but it's like, obviously politics nowadays is even worse. But in 2015 was great, actually. Brazil was in a great situation, was growing massively, which is unfortunately gone back a lot recently with the current government. But yeah. So there are people that miss, and I've got obviously friends that are friends for life, like school friends, that I have known for, I don't know, 30 years now. University friends, as many of them come to visit me. Some of my friends come visit.
I never get that from America. Like unless I've paid for it or used my points from flying, not many people. They always said they would, but not many people have.
Yeah, look, nowadays it's harder for them because the difference between real is the Brazilian currency, and euro is 1 to 6 and a bit.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
That's tough. So do they see you as not now you come from a poor background, I came from a poor background, and somehow I'm outside the world. Do they say, oh, you must be rich or something? Like people make so many assumptions about it's like yeah,
they all think I'm rich. Like I don't have kids, so like, oh, she doesn't have kids, she doesn't have money like to spend money on anything, it's just for her, and they think that I'm rich. Yeah, some of them know that I'm not, that I'm just like an average standard life, but some of them do think I'm rich, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I wish I was. If I would be rich, I would probably traveling the world, not like working in a cold country.
So sorry, Damon, I'm gonna ask the next question, which you're really good at asking other people. Are you ever going to go back and settle back in Brazil?
No.
Why is that?
No. So I don't. So one of the reasons, I didn't say that one of the reasons why I left Brazil. Obviously, I wanted to travel the world, and that was always what I wanted. But also, I think there is an element of the Brazilian culture that I don't like much. So there is this, I hate saying that because some people are going to kill me if I do say that. But some of the behaviors of Brazilians that they had to develop to live by, right? It's something that, especially when I went to Australia and I saw the generosity of people towards you without any interest, they are just being generous to you because you're a good human being, which I became as well. Like Damana helped me so much, and other friends helped me, and I do the same for other people nowadays because of that. Right, because I had the chance to look at that from a place of wealth, not a place of poverty. So there is a lot of taking advantage of people because they need to.
So that's your change that's happened to you, which is substantial. That's incredible, and it's good that you are aware of that. Yeah.
And I love the fact that I had the chance to. I'm really like fortunate to have the chance to look at that, and be able to recognize that this is something that should be the norm, not the not the exception. And it's not a norm in most countries,
That's
because
a lot
people.
like you said something about, told me once that you were hyper aware when you lived in Brazil. You always knew where people were and people around you, what they were doing, and that you'd lost that coming to Australia. Well, not lost it, but it had disappeared.
So you walk on the street looking, around, because you don't know who's going to try to do something to you, to steal or any of that. And it's really interesting because when you go back there, people even say like, hey, you know how to walk around. You need to have to put your bag in front of you and close it. You can't like just forget it open, or, So this is all these protective mechanisms that you need to have, you know, to protect yourself.
Yep.
And you come here in Europe or in Australia, you don't have that. People not even understand that.
Yep.
Right? Because they think, why would you have to do that?
Yep.
Right? So and it's great that you don't have to think about it, you know.
Yep.
Having those reflexes. I remember in Brazil, I was in a bus, and it was in the south, like in a nice suburb in Rio, right? It wasn't like someone dodgy or anything. And I was in the bus, and this guy entered the bus, and the bus was kind of empty. And he comes in, and I was sitting close to the window, so there was, you know, empty space. And the guy goes and sit right on my side, like the empty, you know. And then I instinctively, I just stood up, pick up my phone, pretend that I was like, oh, I need to jump. And then I asked for the bus driver to open the door, because that's another thing as well. Bus drivers stop outside the bus stop. People don't understand that in Brazil. It's like, why does that happen? Because obviously it's unsafe, right? Well, but it's also unsafe if you only have to wait until the next stop, because if something is happening inside the bus,
Yep.
you know, you need to be able to stop, right? And then I just asked the bus driver to stop, and I got out because I don't know, my instincts kicked in that guy was going to steal me.
Mhm.
You know, maybe not, I don't know, but like an empty bus and the guy sits on my side. Why?
Yeah.
Right? There's so many
And there's no
places.
one else there. Like, that's the scary bit,
There was
right?
like a very few people in the bus, you know. And obviously there is the stereotypes that is something that you know, it's really unfortunate. But, you know, if you see in Brazil, how many times you would see a group of people, which is, I'm sure in America, you're going to see the same, like of Black people, it's automatically someone who you wouldn't be close to.
Yep.
And this is horrible.
Yeah.
It's like, why?
Yeah.
You know, that does not make sense, but you grow up with it. I'm bloody white, right? I grew up with that.
Yep.
And I don't want that for my life. I want to be able to walk around and see people as equal.
Yep.
You know, I don't want to have that, but it's unfortunately it's in the culture. It's
Yeah,
changing.
I think it's
changing.
I've learned, come to accept that I think deep down, and Damana may disagree with me, everyone has some racism in them when they look at certain people. But the important thing to me is, how aware are you of that within yourself, and how do you respond to that?
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of courage. I mean, even I, like, you know, I'm a pretty progressive guy, and many people would say that, and I can still be in situations where I'm like, I'm going to keep an eye on everything because I need to. And, you know, it could be because of the way they're dressed, which seems, and they could be white people or dark people, it doesn't really matter. Or it could be because there's an ethnicity involved that I'm not comfortable with, I'm not familiar with. And just instinctively you do it, and you hate, I mean, you feel like an asshole, but you do
Exactly.
it.
Well, women do it all the time. Not every
Yeah.
woman thinks that every man is a rapist, but we certainly do make sure that we account for it in case that happens.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, you never know. Like, you could be near somebody that you've known for 5 years, and suddenly they just suddenly make a subtle gesture. You reject them, and then you don't know this person. They could turn suddenly violent, and that happens to women a lot.
Yeah.
And so my mother grew up in a generation where it was expected that they would not expected, but they were prepared to be beaten by their husband.
Yeah.
And that's changed a lot, but not fully. So yeah, it's you.
But you're right. Like, we all have, I think it's what you do with your bias and your unconscious bias that matters. So I always say everyone's judgmental, but do you act on it?
Yes.
Right. And we're supposed to do it as humans. It's a biological imperative that we, you know, are safe in our environment. We check what's going on. Instead, I try to look at like born identity. You know, I know my exits, and I could run flat out for maybe 3 seconds. But it's about, we all do it. It's just whether we act on it or not.
That is true. That is absolutely true. Yeah.
Should we go into the rapid fire questions? Are we?
Yeah, we might go into our rapid fire round, which is just ask a few questions, and they're kind of unrelated and stuff. Answer as long as you want. You don't have to answer quickly. Some people give one word, some people talk. Jim, do you want to start?
Yes. What makes you cringe when you think about Brazil? Like when you go, but then also what makes you cringe when you think about where you currently are in Germany?
In Brazil, what makes me cringe is when I have to deal with any government institution.
It's universal, isn't it?
So bureaucratic. It's like, oh. And then here in Germany, what makes me cringe is actually something similar. They love blood letters. Everything's paperwork. And I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
Please send me
I have to send a letter. I can't go online and say, look, you are allowed to take my money out of my account. I can't fill in a form and I have to send a letter. I took it out of my, I have a stamp here sitting on my desk.
A stamp. Who's used a stamp in ages?
I know. Oh, exactly.
That's interesting. That's like Americans and their checks. I'd never, ever used a check until I went to America and I had to ask people, how do I write this? What do I put here? I had no idea.
I used checks in Brazil. I mean, when I left Brazil, I still used it, but like we don't use it anymore. Not as much.
That's hilarious. Jim, any others?
How this hopefully, I'm sorry, this might be a long answer question for you. How differently do you see Brazil now that you've left? Like, think about what you thought about when you were before you left, and now, like, how do you look at it differently?
How do I look at it different? I think Brazil, look, I think there is a tenderness to it, a more respectful tenderness, but also, and I'll explain a little bit what it means. Obviously, it's almost like probably for tourists, like, oh, I'm going to Brazil, that amazing place, that paradise, because I see a lot of the beauty. You know, I traveled a lot, and I've got to say these out loud, but Rio is probably one of the most beautiful cities I ever been in. And I wouldn't be able to say that probably if I would be there.
Yep.
We never left because I wouldn't have a comparison. But like, I've traveled a lot, and Rio is still, for me, is still the most beautiful city I ever been.
Yep.
So this is, for me, I think the biggest thing, and I keep saying that to people, like when people say, oh, but it's violent, it's actually, the violence is less than it used to be. It's just the corruption that is horrible. Corruption, but we always had. It was getting better, and now definitely is worse, right? It's very, and then it's hard to deal with a government like we have now. And also that is really the sad part. Yeah. But also see poverty, right? So this is, for me, something that I try to avoid. I honestly think like deep consciousness, one of the reasons why I avoid going to Brazil is because you see a lot of poverty. And it's not something that, I guess you can see poverty anywhere in the world, but because you know it's from your own place,
yep.
You know, it makes me sad. It just makes me truly, deeply sad.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that point that there is not enough money that I could give to help it. You know, there is nothing, it's so hard to change, and it's a systemic change, and we are not going anywhere close to make it better. If anything, is actually getting worse.
Yeah,
it's heartbreaking, isn't it? It's heartbreaking to watch.
It's heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking.
And Jim's talked about watching America from outside, and you know, the kind of fall of Rome thing that I always talk about, Jim. Like, that's got to feel hard to watch, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the poverty that's climbing because jobs are drying up, and you know, technology's taking over, and you know, drug use is increased everywhere, and poverty. And I mean, I grew up really poor, and I don't know how similar or different ours was, but I'm like you, like I go back and I see people struggling just to make ends meet. It's like, you know, and that creates a level of anxiety and insecurity that causes so many other problems because of that. And it's hard to see, especially about people you care about. And I fully understand that. I get it.
And one of the things that I started doing, moving abroad, because obviously some people manage to leave Brazil and move abroad, right? Either for whatever reason, jobs or marriage or whatever, study, you know. I actually try to appreciate more the Brazilian workers, like business, and try to spend my money on those, you know.
That's good.
And support more, especially the people that are working very hard to make it visible to the world what's going on.
Yep.
Right. So I've support some of, you know, some people that are trying to speak out, you know, and that's how I minimally can help, you know, to see if that because giving money to someone who is struggling on the street, it's a temporary solution, you know, it's an immediate solution. That's not going to permanent. It's not going to be a permanent one.
Yeah.
Right? So I try to look at how can I help in a more, systemic way. And I know through knowledge we can get there,
Yeah.
through making it ample, and support education and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to do, because I think that's, it's something that I can do from here.
Yeah.
I know that some people may think that is an irony, because like, but you're living in such a great place, you don't have the same struggles that we do. I don't know, like, obviously I understand that, but I also understand that I came from that doesn't get out of me.
Yeah.
I can't just remove what I came from,
Yeah.
from inside me and pretend that, I
Yeah.
mean, maybe people may be able to do that. I can't. I look at
Yeah.
it and it breaks my heart. It makes me sad.
Yeah.
And
People
then
think,
I get desperate. I get desperate sometimes. Like, I'm reading the news, I'm like exasperated. I was like, what can I do,
yeah.
to make a change?
And I'm in the same boat about America, and it's people think that I don't love it because I left. And I mean, everything I talk about America all the time. I wear my baseball team and my football team, and I'm still deeply involved in reading about politics, so I understand what's going on.
Yeah.
But it just feels heartbreaking. So yeah. Let's, Damana, you need to ask another question. I've gone too deep on these final questions.
I was just going to add to what you guys were saying. My mother always refers to Papua New Guinea as her mother country, and I always think that it says it all. Like, it's that connection that you'll never break or cut, and people don't get that. It's sad to watch. Okay. I mean, I've actually run out of questions except for one really important one, and Jim, feel free to add after this. But you've lived in many places. You've made the decision to move for many different reasons. What advice do you give people who are thinking about living somewhere else, going over and not just visiting, but living?
Make sure who you are. I think that's a very important advice, because I see what I see in my experience, and I myself as well. Sometimes you get lost. You get lost because you're embedded in a different culture, and then you don't know who you are anymore. What is your identity? I lost my identity. I had to recover it and learn who I am, because traveling, especially in so many different places, you really need to look deep down inside you to keep true to yourself. And don't let the place mold you too much, because obviously you do, like, as I said earlier, you try to behave differently because culture is different, but inside yourself you need to make sure that you are strong enough. I've seen people that couldn't cope, they had to go back to Brazil. I've seen that because they just couldn't cope, or people fighting to get through their other culture. You can't. You need to be open-minded. You need to be extremely open-minded and deeply respectful.
So there's a bit of a balance between the two, and there's a conflict that's one's trying to control the other instincts. Yep. Yeah,
you do. So I would always look inside myself, like, who am I? Am I going to be able to cope with this move? Because it's a big move. People think it's flowers for the 6 months that you're in. It's always flowers. Oh, it's amazing. 6 months is like, you love that place. Everything's amazing. It's the best place you've been, especially if you never lived anywhere else. Right. You always wanted to leave your country, for example. But it's not going to be always flowers, because then you're going to start seeing the problems. And when you see those problems, you need to be very strong, understanding, where you are and what is your purpose, why you were there. Yeah. What is the purpose I came here in the first place? What did I want from this place? Do I want to learn the language? Do I want to learn the culture? Or do I want to just work? What is it? This leads into the why, which is, why should people go do it? If they are thinking about it, why should they find the opportunity? Or if they're given the opportunity, why should they do it? For me, it was always about experiencing different cultures, getting to see the world. That was always the reason why I wanted to go. Yep. And I think when you come from the perspective of, like, I want to see the world, what it means is I want to understand how people are different. Yep. And be able to learn from that. Yep. And you do. I incorporated many things from different cultures that I appreciate, and I wanted to keep doing it. Right. So that's for me what it is. To counter that, and I'm actually going to counter it because I think you have an answer for this. I hope you do. There are going to be people that back home in my country even,
that'll say, well, I'll give that answer, but then they'll say, but why can't you do that reading a book or watching a movie and just stay here? You're gonna, you know, what is the thing that sets that experience apart from reading those things?
Well, look, as I said, like I study history.
Yep.
And I read so many books about the world, you know, and it's never the same.
Yeah.
You know, like, for example, I read Chimamanda's books, and I'm dying to go to Nigeria, you know, because I read her books. She tells a very good, she's a great storyteller, and she tells a very good story about Nigeria. 100% is not going to be the same if I'm there.
Yeah.
Right. So it's everywhere is different. And I'm going to tell you something else. When I went to Australia, I had never read anything about Australia. It was very little that I knew about Australia. But here in the Netherlands and Germany, I countless books and stories, you know, in the Spanish War that took 80 years with the Netherlands, that they financed their own war, which is crazy to think about. It's like, what? And also because they also had, they colonized Brazil, parts of Brazil, right? They've been there for a while. In New York, like Harlem is a Dutch word. Yep. Right, they traded, you know, and yeah, it's never the same. You experience the smell; it smells different. Yep. It tastes. You give different dimensions to the place. It's not only your mind, you know. It's going to enrich your experience, obviously, because you can touch it. Yeah, you can feel it.
I usually counter that. Those. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to add one thing. Every time I go to a place I haven't been before, every time, no matter where I am, I have that goosebumps, you know, that I've been fortunate to get to see this place, you know, and I'm thankful for that. I thank the world for that. Like, it's really funny because my partner's like, have you felt the goosebumps yet? It's like, I feel these goosebumps of like, oh my God, this means, you know, thank you for being here, you know, and I thank the place. I thank for being there. And it can be, it doesn't need to be a country, a city. You know, it's enough. Sometimes even like I got to see a suburb around here, and it's beautiful. And I'm like, oh, I'm thankful for being here, right? Because every corner is different.
Yeah,
it is.
That's a really good answer.
It is. It's a good answer. And Jim, you were saying that you counter.
Oh, I tend to counter friends who say things like that. I say, you know, they may love a sport or something like this. I was like, oh, I can read a book about the sport. And then I know that the first thing you're going to tell me when I say that is you need to experience it. I'm like, so traveling and living abroad is the same thing. It's you can read about it, but understanding, and it's about new experiences, and that's important. Yeah,
they also say that reading a book about mountain climbing doesn't make you a mountain climber.
Yep.
And I always use that line. The other thing I say is I've been to places multiple times, and each time they were different.
Yep.
So the difference is that I was there. I saw Paris with Bernarda for like the umpteenth time, but it was on her birthday, so it was different. And you know, we went to a restaurant Napoleonian, and we did all sorts of stuff that I'd never done before. Then I gave her like Demana speed tour of the Louvre, and you know, it was all that kind of stuff. But it was sharing it with her that made that one of my most special times in Paris.
I bet that would have been fun.
It was good fun. If you want to have fun, go to Paris with a bunch of cool Brazilians. It was good fun. And a German.
I should go to meet my family. Yeah.
I got adopted. I can go to Rio now without Barry.
Yeah, you did. You did. You definitely did.
Well, thank you.
My family always ask about them. How is your friend Amanda?
Oh, we're Instagram friends and everything. So yeah, we're always like liking each other's stuff. Benny, thank you for doing this. I knew you were going to be one of our most interesting people, and you totally win for most hops.
Yes, thank you very much. This was great. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And congratulations on moving to Germany.